undue hardship. And the same with the addition on the side of the house. I'm really concerned, and I think we had testimony today about what we're about here, which is to either grant variances based on that undue hardship or whether or not we're going to create a precedent that somebody who's in violation of the zoning code could come here and say, these variances right here were granted because of their existing condition and not base it on some undue hardship. So I think we've been clear where we've made variances, why we make those variances, so that we are not creating a precedent that could come back later where somebody is in violation and could say, in this case here, we've granted them. I'm in agreement that, and I think the appellant has agreed to modify the fence, and I think we still have to grant a variance there for portions of the fence that are still going to be up above 6 feet. So I'm willing to accept the variance given the modifications that the appellant has indicated. I'm regarding B or 2, regarding the deck going to the setback, I'm concerned about, especially if it's adding any issues with the water, and I do not know that. I'm beginning to think that the water is just a good neighbor, as Mr. Nye mentioned, a good neighbor issue, and how operations for the pool or hosing down the pool affect water into the neighbor's yard. Regarding concrete, regarding the size of the pool is 21% too big. That doesn't necessarily concern me, as well as the apron of the pool because of the hardship that it's going to take in order to create those. So regarding the size of the pool and the concrete apron, because I believe I heard testimony today that the water was not coming necessarily from the pool apron, but was coming more from the deck area, that I'm willing to grant a variance for both the pool and the pool deck. Then it comes to the additions. The one is on a concrete slab. Again, I think we're looking at some hardship. The one that is on the north side of the structure is a challenge. The pool equipment addition, which is number 6, I'm not in favor of granting that as a variance, because I think it's going to be, once you start taking down the, number 1, start taking down the lattice work, then it's going to become even more apparent, and why we have accessory structures that are located a minimum of 3 feet off the property line. So to sum up, number 1, grant the variance for those portions. Number 2, I'm having a challenge here. I'm initially thinking that we need to deny it, but I'd like to hear some from other people. Regarding the concrete of the pool, I accept both of those, the addition on the north side of the house. I accept that. Regarding the pool equipment structure, I am not in favor at this point of granting that variance. And would certainly like to hear from other people.
I would just like to chime in on one point that you brought up, Mr. Haber, in the precedents. I mean, we run the risk of the whole, better to ask for forgiveness than permission. We're trying not to set that precedence here. That, going back to the history of this property, the history of the owner, he was in the construction trade. He was a roofer. He worked on properties. He should have known better. And I'm sure, as Mr. Nye knows, ignorance of the law is no excuse. So I mean, there's some concerns that I have with setting precedents that we say, okay, we'll let people do it, and then based on hardship, they can come back and we'll retroactively correct the issue for them. So I do, I do see some areas where we can work with the appellants, but at the same time too, we need to kind of look at our board's position and the position of the township as well too. I mean, we are effectively castrating them, so to speak, if we issue opinions like that.
Well, it just seems to me that part of the logic behind our being here is to help serve the neighborhoods. And in this particular case, the neighborhood doesn't seem to have a problem with what's going on in that property. The problem that I'm hearing is about water drainage, and that has nothing to do, in effect, with, I guess we're trying to say that some of these issues could be the reason why there's excess water drainage, but bottom line is it sounds like it's actually none of these. It sounds like it's something to do with people coming in and letting hoses run and all that type of stuff. And so beyond that, the neighborhood seems to be satisfied with the way the structure is and how everything is in that particular yard. Primarily, even though most of it didn't come before the zoning commission in the front end. So I don't know. The logic I feel is that we're here to speak for the neighborhood. Yes, rules are put into place to help protect the neighborhood, bottom line, but if there's a problem, the hood has to say something. And in this case, the hood is saying they're happy with it the way it is, from what I can tell. That's bottom line. As far as adjusting the fence height, I don't think that we're talking about adjusting the fence height all the way around. I think we're only talking about in the areas where it's above 6 foot. And then as far as the side yard fencing, it doesn't look like it's really encroaching on anybody, and it doesn't go out to the front of the house. It just extends up. In one case, not even halfway up, and in the other case, not even a quarter of the way up. So, and I don't hear anything from the neighbors saying that it's an encroachment on their property. So, my concern is serving the neighborhood, and the neighborhood isn't complaining. So, that's my thoughts.
Any further comments? Questions, concerns? Does anybody wish to make a motion? Might be easier to make a motion based on each variance individually.
I think it would. I think the sense of the board is that we're inclined to grant variance A to the extent that it seeks a 6-foot fence on the side yard and that's it. And then require the applicant, as the applicant's proposed, to reduce it to 6 feet or less all the way around. Is that what we're shooting for here? Is that what everyone's hoping to accomplish? So I know how to word a motion.
Right, 6 feet in the rear yard.
And so if it's below 6 feet with the lattice, he doesn't have to take the lattice off,
Right,
right?
right.
And that's up to him.
And 6 feet and 100% closed within the side yard,
Right.
where it's supposed to be 4 feet and 75% open.
Not to exceed current footprint or something.
Right.
Don't bring it further
Right.
forward.
Right.
Okay. All right, well, let's see if we can do this. Mr. Chairman, with respect to variance A, I move that we grant the requested variance to the extent that it seeks a 100% closed 6-foot-high fence in the side yard with the and allow that in a manner consistent with the existing fence.
let me paraphrase. So what we're saying is the variance is focused on the side yard
Right.
to allow it to be 100% enclosed and 6 feet high. And that to the extent that the fence can be modified by removal of the lattice, we would accept that. So it may be a little bit more than 6 feet, but what we're saying is removal of the lattice portion above the solid portion of the fence.
In the side yard.
No, in the rear yard too.
What if we broke it out into side and rear yards and handled them each separately?
That's fine. That's fine.
So just to, in the staff report, staff did include a recommended condition, that it states that, I just had it, it says that, should the Board of Zoning Appeals grant the variance, staff recommends that the board consider the following condition, that the fence shall be modified to a maximum 6-foot-high privacy-style fence in the side and rear yard area. So it doesn't get into the specifics as far as the
That
lattice.
would've been a much easier way to Okay.
So you want to
Yeah, let's spend this again. Mr. Chairman, I move that we grant variance A subject to staff's recommended condition.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Secretary, please call the roll. Variance A.
Mr. Correll,
Aye.
Mr. Nye,
Aye.
Mr. Haber,
Aye.
Mr. Halpin,
Aye.
Mr. Sion.
Aye. After that, we can move on to variance B.
This is the deck to the property line, right? I'm not sure what the consensus is on this. My inclination, based on the size and shape and history of the lot, is to grant the requested variance, but I'm not sure that that carried majority. So I'll defer to someone else.
I'm okay with it. And the reason is because there's nobody complaining about it.
That is one reason, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm in favor with it too.
Okay. But do we have any recommended conditions for this?
no, not for me. Does staff have any recommended conditions?
I don't believe so,
There
let
was
me
none in-
double
Yeah,
check.
I don't think there are any report.
So, there isn't a recommended condition, but I think we should impose the condition that the privacy fence be maintained. So for example, if they were requesting this variance and had no privacy fence, I think we may well feel very different about it. So, I think the way I would word it is that I would grant the variance, subject to the condition that a privacy fence substantially in compliance with variance A is maintained. So you can take out the fence if you want, but then you gotta knock the deck back.
Sounds good.
I agree, yeah.
Okay, so I think the way I would word it is, Mr. Chairman, I move that we grant the request in variance B, subject to the condition that the applicant maintains a privacy fence substantially similar to the existing privacy fence and in compliance with variance A.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Correll,
Everybody fine with that? How it was worked? I thought it was worded. Agreed. Okay, all right.
Mr. Nye,
Aye.
Mr. Haber,
Aye.
Mr. Halpin,
Aye.
Mr. Sion.
Aye. Move on to variance C.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we grant variance C.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just think on both these, regarding the size of the size of the pool and the concrete apron will be imposing undue hardship on the appellant if we don't grant these two variances.
Any other further discussion?
And that the neighborhood is not complaining about it.
We have a motion and a second on variance C. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Corral?
I agree.
Aye.
Mr. Nye?
Aye.
Mr. Haber?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. Variance D with regards to concrete pool apron.
You want a break?
Yeah, why don't you take this one? 'Cause I'm not sure I agree with you on this one, but go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, regarding variance D, a request for a concrete pool apron with a side and rear yard setback of 0 feet where 3 feet is required. I move that we grant the variance request. Because of undue hardship, to modify, I'm going to include Mr. Halpin's because the neighborhood has not chimed in negatively to the fact that it exists.
Second.
Can I, hold on one second, let me think about this. I think, as we did with the deck going to the property line, I think we should include a condition that they maintain a fence substantially similar to the one that's there in compliance with variance A. Because again, I think if you took out the fence, concrete coming right to the property line starts to look very different to the neighbors.
Yeah.
So I move that we would add that additional condition.
I'm fine with that amendment.
Okay. So
I'll second it.
let's try to package that all up into one big thing.
Can you please repeat the condition?
I think we should, if we're going to grant the variance, we should do so with the additional condition that a fence substantially similar to the existing fence and which complies with variance A is maintained.
Okay.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Seeing none, will the secretary please call the roll for variance D?
Mr. Corral?
Aye.
Mr. Nye?
Aye.
Mr. Haber?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. Variance E, existing,
Mr. Chair, regarding this variance for the addition in the side yard that is less than 8 feet from the property line where 8 feet is required, I'm going to move that we grant the variance basically for 3 reasons. Number one, again, undue hardship for moving the addition and its concrete pad. Number two, the essential character of the neighborhood is not going to be, what's that condition? Altered because of the existence of the addition. And there was a third item that I don't remember. Nobody in the neighborhood complained. And the fence issue does not then apply to this one as a condition.
Right. Second.
we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? Seeing none, will the staff please call the roll for variance E?
Mr. Corral?
Aye.
Mr. Nye?
Aye.
Mr. Haber?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. That we'll move on to variance F. Variance F is the existing 64-foot accessory structure at the base of the pool pump house.
So in that particular case, the only concern is that the roof goes over the line. Is that right?
No, it needs to be 3 feet off the property line. It is on the property line, is my understanding. You know, 2 of the 4 walls are the fence. I think the fact that you can see the roof over it is, I mean, it probably would be better if it were in front of the fence. But that's not in and of itself a violation.
Now, the staff report did mention that the roof accessory structure is not screened by the existing privacy fence. It is above that. There was proposal by the house on that they could put in a flat roof rather than the current roof that they have right now.
I mean, I think we could go one of three ways with this. We could either grant the variance as is, we could require them to install a flat roof or a roof that is, not visible above the fence, whatever they want to do with the fence, whether they have a 6-foot fence or a 3-foot fence, as long as it's hidden, might be okay if it's on the property line. Or we could require them to move it off the property line and they could, build it however high they want, pretty much. I'm really unsure about this one.
Well, I think either way, the solution to that is to deny the variance.
And then they could either move it off or they can,
Come back and say, this is how we want to deal with the issue. But I think either way, we're looking to deny it.
I suppose that's right.
And that not for us to design a solution that satisfies what we think might be a variance, other than strict application of the zoning resolution.
You're right.
Mr. Chairman, regarding the variance request for an accessory structure with a side and rear yard setback of less than 3 feet, where 3 feet is required, I move that we deny the variance request.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, will the secretary please call the roll?
Actually, can I just add some discussion just to kind of flesh out a thought on that real quick?
Yep.
Just in light of the standards, it strikes me that one might look at this and say we're treating variance F differently from how we treated variance B. They're both looking for setbacks off the property line. So I would just say, in light of the standards to be considered, I think the main difference between the two is item number 6, whether the property owner's predicament can be obviated through some other means. I think it is, we've talked a bit about hardship before. It seems like to me that it would be much easier for them to reconfigure this particular structure than to strip 8 feet off their deck, and that is why I'm voting differently on these two. That's all. I'm gonna put that out there.
Say that again?
In some sense, this request is similar to the request to bring the deck up to the property line. What makes it different in my mind is that one of the standards to be considered is whether the property owner's predicament can be feasibly obviated through some method other than a variance. And I think that is true for the pump house in a way that it's not for the deck. They could relocate the pump house, reduce its size, whatever it might be, in a way that is much easier. In other words, they can more feasibly obviate their predicament for the pump house than they could for the deck, which would require stripping 8 foot off by 170 feet long.
So what I hear you saying is that you're in favor of denying the variance?
Yes, and then the reason is
Because,
this is more easily fixable than the other one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, I agree with that.
No changes to the motion?
None.
No further discussion? Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Gorell?
Aye.
Mr. Nye?
Aye.
Mr. Haber?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye.
Okay.
With that, we will move on to the public hearing, case number 1-2020 BZA. Will the staff please read the report?
Just a note, we will not be journalizing this case tonight.
Okay.
Staff didn't have a resolution prepared.
Okay.
Okay. What's next? 1/2020. Air shower.
We're not gonna do that one.
This is gravel
Okay.
driveway, right?
All right, so this is case number 1-2020 BZA. The applicant is Donna Lynn Maples and Jody J. Mel, property owners. The address is 1161 Ayrshire Avenue. Zoning is C residence. The request is a variance request to allow a stone driveway where only a solid dust-free surface for a driveway is permitted. And that is per Article 5.3 D3 of the Anderson Township zoning resolution. A bit of history about this case. The house was built in 1941, and the current property owner purchased the property in December of 2017. A zoning certificate for a 6-foot-high privacy fence in the rear yard was issued in March of 2001. In August 2019, Anderson Township Planning and Zoning Department received an anonymous complaint regarding the construction of a pergola, new front steps, addition to the front porch, and facade changes to the house. Upon inspection, this was confirmed, and it was determined that the work was done without a zoning certificate. A letter was sent to the property owner to bring this to their attention. Later in August of 2019, a zoning certificate was issued for the front porch and trellis additions. The trellis addition has not been finished. Hamilton County Building Department has followed up with the owner regarding the requirements from their office. Lastly, the applicant submitted several pictures of gravel driveways throughout Anderson Township as part of their application. Planning and zoning staff has determined that a vast majority of the addresses mentioned have legal non-conforming gravel driveways, as they were constructed prior to Hamilton County zoning, which was established in 1947. This is the property map showing the location of the property. An aerial image showing that the driveway goes right out to Ayrshire Avenue. And this is a topography map showing the relatively flat property. And then this is the site plan that's submitted by the applicant. So this is the location of the stone driveway. There is a concrete apron that goes directly onto Ayrshire Avenue. This is an image showing the concrete apron and the existing stone driveway, looking from Ayrshire Avenue. And again, another image of the concrete apron as well as the existing gravel driveway. Staff is of the opinion that the variance is not substantial. The apron of the driveway is paved with concrete, which helps contain the stones within the driveway and not allow them to spill out onto the street. Additionally, the applicant has stated that the stone is washed, screened, and dust-free. The essential character of the neighborhood would not be altered, and adjoining properties would not suffer a substantial detriment as a result of the variance. The stone material the stone material used is decorative and has also been washed, which will minimize dust. The variance would not adversely affect the delivery of governmental services. The property owner's predicament can be feasibly obviated through some method other than a variance. The driveway could be paved with asphalt or concrete, although the applicant has stated that the intention of the stone driveway is to accommodate a drainage system beneath the stone driveway. Access to the drainage system located beneath the driveway is important for future maintenance. Staff is of the opinion that the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed by granting the variance based on the concrete apron of the driveway, the property owner's intent to prevent flooding in the lower level of their house, and the fact that the stone is washed and decorative. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Could you go back to
In one of the
picture
photos,
number?
there was, the second photo, I think, well, I guess in that one, there's different gravel off to the right. Is that just landscaping gravel? I guess that's neither here nor there, I suppose. Is that right? As far as the zoning request is, as far as the variance request is concerned.
Yeah, that is correct.
All right.
Any further questions of staff? Seeing none, will the appellant or the appellant's representative please step forward? State your name, address, and any affiliation to the case.
My name is Joe Mel. I am one of the property owners, 1161 Ayrshire Avenue.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add to the?
Yes, as one of the applicants of this case, the co-applicant, Donna Maples, is unable to attend this evening, although she does agree with everything that I'm going to say. We do agree with almost everything in the staff report. In particular, we agree with the following findings. The essential character of the neighborhood will not be altered. and the adjoining properties would not suffer substantial detriment as a result of the variance. The stone material used is decorative and has also been washed, which will minimize dust. The variance will not adversely affect the delivery of governmental services. Staff is of the opinion that the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed by granting the variance based on the concrete apron of the driveway, the property owner's intent to prevent flooding in the lower level of the house, and the fact that the stone is washed and decorative. I feel the staff has done, honestly, an excellent job of writing the report. However, it is referenced in the history section of the report that we submitted several pictures of gravel driveways throughout Anderson Township. The fact of the matter is we submitted 31 photos and addresses. We certainly could have submitted more, but elected to stop at that point. Thank you for your consideration. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So as I understand this, the work entailed framing in a garage opening that was a lower level garage that was concreted in? Is that part of the work that you've been undergoing here?
All due respect, the matter that we have framed in is a relationship to the driveway.
Okay, so if I look at those windows over there, it looks like to me that there was a garage that's been framed up.
Yes.
Was that part of the work that you were doing?
In regard to the driveway?
Yes.
As part of water control for the whole property, yes.
Okay. So this diagram right here shows a footer drain that goes how long? Is that just in front of that wall?
Yes.
Okay. And where does that drain to?
It goes into a sump pump.
Into a sump pump?
But there's more to the system than just a footer drain. There's a J-channel system that the EverDry company installed as part of my application I put in there. So it's a little more complicated than just a footer drain.
Is this what you're referring to as a J system?
That's what they call it, yes.
And what is that?
It would be a sealant on the front of the wall
Okay.
that goes down onto another permeable membrane that there's then corrugated pipe and washed gravel. Again, this is not, I did not do that. That was done by the EverDry company.
Okay.
So again, they refer to it as a J system, but that's my best description.
So you have a corrugated, what typically is a corrugated footer drain with a fabric on the outside of it?
Yes, it's a plastic.
Okay. Did they also do this one? There's an arrow here that says that this footer that's on the inside of your house
Yes.
footing, that was done there. So they did that around the perimeter of the inside of the house?
Perimeter and exterior, yes.
Okay. And that's also hooked into the sump?
Yes.
Okay. And what is the maintenance that you are considering as being needed with this with this footer system here?
The system has failed already since it was been installed.
This one right here?
That's the current one. One of the first systems that was installed to prevent water from going into the lower level has failed. So,
And that was after the wall was installed?
correct.
Okay.
So, the corrugated, can get silt in it and might need to be replaced. Again, a whole slew of different things that they said would be a potential issue, but they would need to have access to guarantee their work.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions from the board?
Well, the only comment I have is the pictures that you gave us are all properties that seem to be, in my opinion, more rural and larger than where your property is. And so, as much as they kind of help justify what you're asking or what you're doing, the properties aren't comparable, in my opinion. And that's just me as an individual, because they're much larger properties with much more land. And,
Well, the reason for submitting the pictures was not to say, oh, hey, go look, they have. What, it goes to the section about doing something, let's see, I think section 5 of the standards, where we elected to do this because it was seen throughout Anderson Township, stone/gravel driveways, before we proceeded to go with this system, which would then need to have access for future maintenance. So it wasn't, hey, they've got one, can we have one mentality? It was, when you live in the community and you drive around, you see them 100 yards, 200 yards, a mile away, we would assume that it was acceptable when we put the project together with EverDry to use the stone as a way to get our guarantee.
okay.
Any further questions for the appellant?
Does any other home on Ayrshire have a gravel driveway?
On Ayrshire, not that I think, but on Sunray, at the very top of the street, there are multiple. Be it driveways or parking pads, whatever you want to describe.
Yeah. Thank you.
And now, is that gray in the picture?
That's old mulch,
Oh, that's mulch?
to address Mr. Nye's question.
Okay. That's 'cause it
This was
looks like-
done, I think the picture was done just a few weeks ago. That's mulch.
Okay, not gravel.
No.
Good deal, thanks.
No further questions? Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak in favor of this appeal? Seeing none, does anyone wish to speak in opposition to this appeal? Seeing none, is the board ready to close the public hearing on this case?
I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Correll?
Aye.
Mr. Nye?
Aye.
Mr. Haber?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. Does anyone wish to start us off on the discussion for this case?
I have a question, I think we have somebody up here who is transcribing? And who is that for? What's that being done for?
I'm not sure.
Since Donna could not be here, she wanted to have a transcript of the discussion.
Oh, okay.
That was the solution that we came up with.
Okay.
In terms of discussion, I think I'm in favor of granting the variance. I don't think it's substantial. I don't think it alters the essential character of the neighborhood, won't affect the delivery of governmental services. And I think the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed. I think they probably could have done it a little bit differently, but given what we heard and given no opposition and having put eyes on it, seeing the street and neighborhood, I'm in favor of granting it so long as it's maintained in substantial compliance with the application dated, whatever the date is, that shows, the washed, dust-free stone. That is my inclination.
Just real quick, according to the agenda, the next step would be to just approve or continue the next case, because that case the applicant is not able to make it. If we could just make a motion to continue that case before deliberating on this case.
Oh, we're not in deliberations yet. I'm sorry. I thought we did that at the top of the. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move that we continue case 2, 2020 BZA.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
And just to clarify, the appellant is not present today.
That's correct. Yeah, the applicant requested
Why are we
a
doing that?
continuation of the hearing to February.
We have a motion and a second. Will the secretary please call the roll?
I'm sorry, we're on case 1?
We're continuing case 2-20B,
So we
2020.
can get to item number 7.
The staff report that was just presented is case 1. The case that's being continued currently is case 2.
I
Oh.
thought we were discussing case 1 now, but we're gonna table case 2, and then we're gonna discuss case 1.
Correct.
We're gonna
So
close, okay.
there's a motion.
All right,
Sorry for the confusion.
all right. Gotcha.
We have a motion and a second. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Correll?
Aye.
Mr. Nye?
Aye.
Mr. Haber?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. And with that, we can go back to, I think the confusion resulted too from our earlier case where we discussed right away since it was
Yeah.
quite lengthy. But we can go back to case number 1-2020 BZA.
Oh.
Mr. Nye, did you want to?
Yeah, Mr.
Restate.
Chairman, sure. As I said a moment ago, I'm in favor of granting the variance so long as the property's maintained in substantial compliance with the application submitted here. I do not think it's a substantial variance. I think the essential character of the neighborhood would not be substantially altered. It wouldn't affect the delivery of governmental services. I think the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed, and substantial justice would be done by granting the variance, and so for those reasons, I'm in favor of granting it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Hold on, hold on.
Wasn't a motion, it was just a position statement, but.
I'm really struggling with this one. Almost even more so than our previous case for a couple of reasons. Number one, being an architect, I think, and understanding stormwater detention and whatnot, that we ought to be graveling every daggone driveway. But that's not what our zoning code says. Our zoning code says that they have to be a solid dust-free surface. The reason why I'm struggling is because I think granting the variance is the right thing to do, and yet our zoning code is clear that says it's got to be a solid dust-free surface. And most every other house that's going to have a footer drain has a paved driveway up to the intersection with the house that is going to cover up some footer drain. So I think what is standard practice is paving up into it. So we've had a couple cases recently, one on State and the other one on Bartles, where we granted this because those locations were suburban farms. And I think we're potentially establishing a precedent here that anybody that's going to want to come in and put gravel in their driveway is going to be able to do it because of this case right here. So I would like I would like to hear other people regarding application of our zoning code that says that the applicant needs to be doing something other than what he's requesting. I mean, the diagram is a typical construction installation where there's waterproofing, a footer drain with a fabric filter on it, and then there is a paved surface that goes up to it. And those systems, in my experience, those systems last somewhat of a long time, and the need for maintenance is going to be rather, if installed correctly, shouldn't be needed. So I'd like to hear something about That's why I'm struggling, is because granting the variance in my world for a number of reasons makes sense, but that's not what our code says.
I take your point that anyone could ask to do this. One of the things that I suppose makes this different is they have, closed off the garage and finished it. I don't think any of the other houses on the street have done that. I suppose if all the houses on the street started doing that and we got a rash of applications for variances of this sort, then I guess we might get into an area where we were substantially altering the character of the neighborhood. You're right that the zoning code does not say that. We're here to offer relief from the code. It's appropriate to do so. But I think your concerns are well articulated. And I'm not sure how to respond other than that.
Well, I would respond by saying the part of the logic, I think, is that the neighborhood, has a vested interest in what happens within the neighborhood. And part of the reason we're here is to help speak for the neighborhood. And when the neighborhood doesn't speak for itself, when it's before us, for especially, and we notify them that this is going to take place, and nobody shows up to object, then I'm thinking, to me, in my mind, that the neighbors are okay with it. And so my logic is that that's part of the logic, the reason why we're here, is to make sure that those that have objections to it are heard, and then we can make a decision based on that.
Well, I don't make that leap. I don't make that leap that just because nobody's here, everybody's okay.
Well, I know that's what, I understand that, and I understand where you're coming from, but that's why the next step after our decision is courts. Long and short.
Well, let's help prevent that one.
Yeah, but no, long,
The public
No.
hearing is closed for this.
Sorry.
yeah, this is, So that- anyway,
Even
that's my
before he got up, I was gonna say, maybe we could reopen the public hearing, so I could offer a question to you.
Somebody,
I move that we reopen up the public hearing.
second.
we have a motion and second. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Correll?
Aye.
Mr. Nye?
Aye.
Mr. Haber?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. Sir, would you please step forward?
I need to restate my name again.
No,
The issue I have is I would feel the driveway is compliance. It is dust-free and solid. The way the code is written, it does not say that it needs to be impervious. So it is clearly a dust-free stone, which addresses one of the issues of the requirement. And again, the code does not say that solid does not mean it cannot be, needing to be impervious.
I wanna check on that, but while I do, 53D3C, right? Solid surface and dust-free. Solid surface is defined.
That's probably not.
It's probably not. What would an unsolid surface be? I mean, I think we understand solid surface to mean concrete or asphalt.
Correct.
I'm-
If you,
I'm not-
if you take a look at II, the next article,
Parking areas and aisles in all districts shall be paved with an asphalt or concrete surface. Do you think it makes a distinction between solid surface and the asphalt or concrete surface?
I believe so.
I mean, if that's the case, he doesn't need a variance at all, right?
Right.
So staff is of the opinion that a variance is required.
Correct.
I think that's my position too. Let me ask you this, though, switching subjects just slightly. I mean, I think your justification is essentially we need to be able to get to the J channel or whatever if there's some malfunction. Couldn't you pave up to within 6 feet of the house?
I would not be able to say yes or no without discussing it with the company that installed it. We spent almost $18,000. And to not have a guarantee applicable because it is inaccessible, that's a lot of money.
So your guarantee is contingent upon access to it?
Yes, because if the system fails, and again, I am a little shell-shocked because we did try to replace the original drain at the garage, and that failed. We added a different sump pump, that failed. Then came up with the solution with an architect. A friend of mine is very, very good with LEED certification that fill it in and then have a system put in front of it. So that's what the history and the evolution of keeping the lower level from habitually flooding, that's how the whole project evolved, which the final step is then, okay, now we have this other systems inside and out to prevent any flooding, but access is critical, again, to have our guarantee with the company enforced.
And this, do I understand that this system goes all the way around the house?
It does, but it's at different levels because the original garage was below grade, which makes it even more difficult than just regular drainage tile, footer drainage tile, inside and out like it's done today, which is, I was with them multiple times with their engineers because the different levels of the draining system, it could not just be put out to the curb. So, but to answer your question, it does go around the house, but it's not a monolithic system. It's at different levels that go into different sections.
But it goes under the stairs, for example. How are you gonna access it if something goes wrong under the stairs?
Right, you mean in the picture to the right there?
Yeah, or maybe on the back. I don't remember what the back looks like.
That goes into a different part of the system. That ties into the regular system that goes to the street. So again,
But if it fails, you still need to dig it up and access.
it's different levels, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they can dig and access around the house at where you see the landscaping, okay? But there's another system that's independent of those, better way to put it, that's down where the original,
6 feet below.
about 4 and change, yeah.
Mr. Guinea, can you go back to the other picture, which is on the other side of the pickup truck? So the system that we're talking about here that EverDry installed down at the base of that new wall is between that retaining wall, stone or block wall, and then your stair on the other side. Is that correct?
Between the two retaining walls,
Between the two retaining walls?
yes.
And that's what EverDry has guaranteed.
They've
That was
they have-
installed new so that you wouldn't get any more drainage or leakage into your lower level.
The majority of the water going into the base, well, technically, I'd probably say, when we had massive flooding, it came through the garage, okay?
Okay.
When EverDry came out and sold us the package, they did drainage on the inside of the lower level and on the outside as well, but the stuff on the outside is at different grades.
Right.
Okay? So
Okay.
there's basically 3 independent systems that help prevent water. The area that is most concerning to me is where the water was coming in before we put the system in, and that is the garage door.
Okay. Okay. Let me say that willing to grant the variance, provided we tie it into specifically this drainage system, and if you want to include the guarantee or whatever it may be, there's gotta be, just like in our two previous cases, where we stated that because these were suburban farms, that we were, I mean, you remember the one on Bartles, that they wanted, I mean, code said we had to pave the whole doggone thing, and we said no, because it's suburban farm, that if we tie something into this, then I can go along with it, just so everybody on down, neighbors or whatever, say, well, you've done it here. We have to have some condition that goes along with it, and I think you articulated it.
Well, I'm kind of coming around to sort of the point of view you articulated earlier, which is, with respect to Bartles, you know, one of the facts in that case that I suppose isn't present here is that it was 30 or 40, 50 feet from the road, the gravel surface.
Right, right.
And so that's why I was asking, could you pave part of the driveway? Maintain your access in the last X feet, or whatever it is, and that way, the next person that comes by and says, I want a gravel driveway, say, well, you know, this guy got one for part of the driveway because of the drainage system, and if you need a drainage system, we'll give you part of the driveway too.
Mm-hmm.
So, should we close the public hearing?
And
I forgot.
going
Go
back
ahead,
to
yeah.
the comments about the aesthetics of the neighborhood, I think that would look terrible. And then
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
having only part of it accessible with a stone driveway, other part being black top, whatever. So to have the whole thing, it would look, then I think I would have neighbors in here.
I understand that concern. I mean, I guess, you know, what we've got to do is we've got to articulate some basis for giving you what you want that doesn't bring every other person who has, you know, lives in this, you know, mid-century neighborhood with these houses and the, you know, the downstairs garage saying, I want a gravel driveway too. I wouldn't necessarily oppose that, but he's right, that's not what the zoning code says. So how do we tie it to the need to access the drainage system or something similar?
Yep.
I guess that's not so much a question for you as it is for us to figure out. That's where we're trying to go. I don't have any other questions.
No, I move that we close the public hearing.
Any further questions for the appellant?
Thank you, sir.
Seeing none, do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Correll?
Aye.
Mr. Nye?
Aye.
Mr. Haber?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, regarding, I'm going to see if I can word this. Regarding case number 1-2020 BZA, I move that we grant the variance to allow a stone driveway based on the need for access to a specifically designed, and I'm carefully wording this, a specifically designed drainage system. Underground drainage system. Designed specifically to prohibit infiltration of water into the lower basement level. I'm gonna I'm going to reference staff's recommendation, and that it is in substantial conformance with the documentation dated December 13th, 2019. That not considered as a part of this decision is the documentation regarding green driveways and stormwater report cards. Our decision is not based on that, and that our decision is based solely on the fact of a proprietary design drainage system that requires future access.
Sounds good.
We have a motion, any discussion?
Did you guys need more of that?
We have the gist.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Any further discussion? Motion and second, will the secretary please call the roll?
Did we have a second? Who seconded? Okay. Mr. Corral?
Aye.
Mr. Nye?
Aye.
Mr. Haber?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye?
Mr. Sion?
Aye.
Thanks.
With that, while you prepare this case, the other one you stated will be for next month?
Yes.
Okay, we will temporary recess.
So, yeah, that's what we're
Right? That's really kind of what I was talking about at the very beginning was when I throw that kind of stuff out, I need help in formulating how do we make this peculiar to the situation so we can grant it.
Box ourselves in on it.
Yeah. We do.